The train's brakes screamed like a banshee, metal grinding against metal, a sound that clawed at the heart and promised catastrophe. In the chaos of the crowded platform, where commuters scrambled like ants under a magnifying glass, Ethan Caldwell stood frozen, his heart pounding louder than the screeching rails. A girl stood alone on the tracks, her tiny frame dwarfed by the looming shadow of the runaway train. Her wide, terrified eyes locked onto his, a silent plea that pierced through the noise. Ethan's briefcase slipped from his hand, his polished shoes scuffed the platform's edge, and in that split second, he made a choice that would unravel his carefully planned life. He didn't know her name, her story, or why fate had placed her in his path, but he knew one thing: he couldn't let her die. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of a single moment to change everything, please hit that like button, leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more stories that touch the soul. Ethan was a single father, a man who wore his exhaustion like a second skin. At 34, he carried the weight of raising his 8-year-old son, Noah, alone after his wife, Lily, had passed 3 years earlier in a car accident. Her death had left a crater in his world, one he filled with endless work hours, late-night parenting, and a stubborn refusal to let grief win. He was a graphic designer, talented but underpaid, scraping by in a cramped Chicago apartment where the radiator hissed more than it heated. Today was supposed to be his lifeline, a job interview at Horizon Innovations, a tech giant offering a senior designer position with a salary that could change everything. It was a chance to give Noah the life he deserved: better schools, a safer neighborhood, maybe even a backyard. Ethan had spent weeks preparing, perfecting his portfolio, rehearsing answers, and ironing his only suit until it looked almost new. The interview was in 90 minutes, and he'd planned every second to get there on time. But life, as Ethan had learned, rarely followed plans. The platform was a sea of chaos. The train, a commuter express, had derailed just beyond the station, its front cars crumpled like paper against a concrete barrier. Smoke curled into the air, and the crowd's panic was a living thing, shoving and shouting. Ethan's first instinct was to run, to protect himself and get to that interview. But then he saw her, the girl on the tracks. She was small, her pink backpack dangling from one shoulder, her braided pigtail swaying as she stood paralyzed, staring at the derailed train that had stopped mere feet from her. No one else seemed to notice her, or if they did, they were too consumed by their own fear to act. Ethan's heart lurched. He thought of Noah, of how he'd feel if his son were the one standing there, alone and helpless. Without a second thought, he vaulted over the platform's edge, his dress shoes slipping on the gravel as he sprinted toward her. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning metal and oil. Ethan's lungs burned as he reached the girl, scooping her into his arms just as a secondary jolt rocked the tracks, a loose car shifting dangerously close. He stumbled, clutching her tightly, her small body trembling against his chest. "It's okay, sweetheart, I've got you," he whispered, though his voice shook as much as she did. He didn't know if she heard him over the chaos, but her tiny hands gripped his jacket like a lifeline. He carried her back to the platform, his heart hammering as he climbed up, ignoring the pain shooting through his ankle from a bad landing. Bystanders finally noticed, a few reaching out to help pull them to safety. Ethan set the girl down, kneeling to check her for injuries. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was unharmed. "Where's your mom?" he asked, scanning the crowd. She pointed shakily toward a woman pushing through the throng, her face a mask of terror. Ethan handed the girl over, watching as mother and daughter clung to each other, sobbing. He felt a fleeting warmth in his chest, but it was quickly drowned by dread. His watch read 10:47 a.m. His interview was in 43 minutes, across town, and his suit was torn, his hands smeared with grime. He grabbed his briefcase and ran, hailing a cab through the gridlocked streets. The driver, a grizzled man with a thick Chicago accent, glanced at Ethan's disheveled state but said nothing, weaving through traffic as fast as he could. Ethan's mind raced. He tried to clean his hands with a tissue from his pocket, but the dirt clung stubbornly. His phone buzzed, his sister, Sarah, who was watching Noah, texting to wish him luck. He didn't reply. All he could think about was the interview, the job, the life he needed to secure for his son. Noah deserved stability, not a father who could barely afford school supplies. Ethan's grief for Lily had never fully faded, but it was Noah who kept him moving forward, Noah who made every sacrifice worth it. If he missed this interview, or worse, bombed it because he looked like he'd crawled out of a wreck, he didn't know how he'd face his son's hopeful eyes tonight. The cab screeched to a halt outside Horizon Innovations, gleaming glass tower at 11:25 a.m. Ethan was 5 minutes late. He paid the driver with crumpled bills, ignoring the man's sympathetic look, and sprinted into the lobby. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at his torn suit and sweaty brow but directed him to the 23rd floor. In the elevator, Ethan caught his reflection in the polished walls. His tie was askew, his jacket sleeve ripped, his face smudged with soot. He tried to smooth his hair, but it was hopeless. The doors opened, and he stepped into a sleek office where a young woman in a sharp blazer greeted him. "Mr. Caldwell, they're ready for you," she said, her tone professional but curious. Ethan nodded, his stomach churning. He was about to walk into the most important moment of his career looking like he'd been through a war. The interview was a blur. The panel, 3 executives in crisp suits, asked about his portfolio, his experience, his vision for Horizon's branding. Ethan answered as best he could, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. He explained his designs with passion, drawing on years of late nights perfecting his craft, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were staring at his torn sleeve, his scuffed shoes. One of the executives, a stern man with graying hair, asked why he was late. Ethan hesitated, then told the truth: he'd stopped to help someone in danger. He didn't mention the girl or the train, keeping it vague, but the man's expression didn't soften. When the interview ended, they shook his hand politely, but their smiles were thin. "We'll be in touch," the woman on the panel said, and Ethan knew what that meant. He left the building feeling like he'd lost something vital, something he might never get back. Back at home, Noah greeted him with a hug, oblivious to the weight Ethan carried. "Did you get the job, Dad?" he asked, his brown eyes bright with hope. Ethan forced a smile, ruffling his son's hair. "We'll see, buddy," he said, his voice thick. That night, he lay awake, replaying the day. He didn't regret saving the girl, how could he? But the cost felt crushing. The job was his chance to give Noah a better life, to move past the shadow of Lily's death. Now, it felt like he'd thrown it away for a stranger. He wondered about the girl, whether she was okay, whether her mother had held her a little tighter that night. He hoped so. It was the only thing keeping the bitterness at bay. The next morning, Ethan's phone rang. It was Horizon Innovations. His heart stopped as he answered, expecting a polite rejection. Instead, the voice on the other end, a woman, warm but professional, asked him to come back for a second interview that afternoon. "The CEO wants to meet you personally," she said. Ethan was stunned. A second chance. He barely processed the details, agreeing to the time and hanging up in a daze. He spent the morning preparing, borrowing a clean suit from his neighbor, practicing his answers again. Noah, sensing his nerves, drew him a picture, a stick-figure family with Ethan holding a briefcase labeled, "New Job." Ethan tucked it into his pocket for luck, kissing Noah's forehead before heading out. At Horizon's headquarters, Ethan was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Behind the desk sat a woman in her early 30s, her presence commanding yet kind. Her nameplate read, "Clara Bennett, CEO." She stood, offering a warm smile that disarmed him. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a chair. Ethan sat, his nerves tingling. Clara didn't dive into questions about his portfolio or skills. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "I heard about what you did yesterday," she said. "At the train station, you saved a little girl." Ethan blinked, confused. How did she know? Before he could ask, Clara continued. "That girl was my niece, Sophie. My sister was on that platform, and she told me everything. You risked your life, and this interview, to save her." Ethan's breath caught. The pieces clicked together, the girl's terrified eyes, her mother's frantic embrace, the chaos of the moment. Clara's expression softened, her voice trembling slightly. "Sophie's my world. My sister said you didn't hesitate, not for a second. I wanted to meet the man who did that." Ethan tried to respond, but his throat was tight. He managed a nod, his mind reeling. Clara went on to ask about his work, his passion for design, his life as a single father. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not just as a designer, but as a person. When Clara offered him the job on the spot, with a salary higher than he'd dared hope, he could barely speak. "You're the kind of person we want here," she said. "Someone who puts others first." Walking out of the office, Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of grief, of struggle, didn't vanish, but it felt bearable. He thought of Noah, of the backyard they could now afford, of the future they could build. He thought of Lily, wondering if she'd been watching, guiding him somehow. And he thought of Sophie, the girl on the tracks, whose life had intertwined with his in a way he'd never expected. That night, he took Noah out for pizza, their first real celebration in months. As Noah chattered about school, Ethan's heart swelled with a quiet, unshakable hope. He'd saved a stranger, and in doing so, he'd saved himself. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness and the beauty of second chances, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts. Your support keeps these stories alive, inspiring others to believe in the goodness that still exists in the world. Before we end, I have a special request. Please drop a comment below and share what this story meant to you, or tell us about a time when a single act of kindness changed your life. Your words could inspire someone else, just as Ethan's courage did. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.